Welcome to the Catalyst Life Coaching Podcast with John Kim and Noelle Cordeaux. If you're inspired to begin your own life coaching practice or just want to learn a little bit more about what it's all about, visit JRNI.co. That's JRNI.co for more information. Your adventure awaits.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Catalyst Life Coaching Podcast. Today we're going to talk about how to check your ego. Right, Noelle?
Yep, when you get called out.
When you get called out. I mean, I have zero ego, so I'm just going to kind of let you talk about what ego is because I have no idea. I know yours is huge.
Bullshit, John. Bullshit.
All right, so let's talk. Okay, so what exactly is ego? What's the difference between, say, ego and healthy ego or your stance? And then we'll talk about getting called out and checking it, which I do think is very important.
Yeah, so ego, I mean, can be a lot of different things, right? But ego is the part of you that finds worth, value, currency in who you are, what you have to offer, and how you conduct yourself in the world. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think
how do we know if it's so how do we know when it's healthy and how do we know when it's bad or how do we know?
I mean, I think that's pretty complex, right? So
Yeah.
I think like one of the really important things to remember about ego is that ego, at its core, represents something about life that's transactional, and we all walk around with ego. We all contend with ego. We might project ego. We might try to get more of it. We might feel like our ego is bruised sometimes. And we talk so much about authenticity and honesty and being who you are and being yourself out there in the world. And the big but is that it comes with a sidecar of having to actually show up and actually do the work when you're engaging in a relationship with other humans. And sometimes they call you out, and then your own map of the world is disrupted because it's so easy to float through life when everyone thinks you're great and you think you're great and everything is wonderful. So how do you deal with it when that piece gets disrupted?
Yeah, I think I think with ego comes pride. I mean, unhealthy or exaggerated ego. Also, they could get in the way. There's also fear, that I think fuels ego. I like this idea of knowing the difference between ego and your stance. So I think when it comes to a stance, and a lot of people don't have one because of what they've been through, and lopsided relationships and self-esteem and all that. When you start to create a stance, I think that's kind of healthy because you start to believe that you deserve something or you want something different. You believe that you're worth something, all of that. And I went through my process, but I think when you just pull from ego, that's like more of a false stance, right? It's not about what you deserve. It's now like almost delusional. It's almost grandiose.
It's almost grandiose, right? And it's so common, but it's also protective. It's also protective to have this kind of idea of yourself and this idea of yourself as a perfect human, and as like forming a stance and doing right in the world. You and I happen to have a unique experience in life in which we are public people, and we both have a lot of people telling us how great we are on a regular basis.
I have very few of that, but yes.
Is
that my ego speaking? Is that my ego saying, tell me more?
I'm talking about from an external perspective, right? So like I'll write a piece I'll write a blog post, or
you're talking about like social media. You're talking about followers.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you'll write a blog post or social media post, and bam, you'll get like 500 people telling you, wow, that's great. That was really useful. That was really helpful. I get the same kind of shit. So for both of us, I would posit that we probably have abnormally inflated egos, right? But those are mostly from a lot of people who don't actually know us well or live with us or deal with us.
Yeah, they only see our words that are very crafted.
Yeah. So what happens when there's this and I think that we're on like a high level, but I think that almost every single human who participates in social media deals with this. They'll write a post, they'll get some likes, they'll get some feedback, and they'll walk around and they'll say, I'm helpful. I'm great. I do this thing out there in the world. And then bam, that intersects with reality of people who are actually trying to have a relationship with you. And then what happens?
Right. Right. I think also something that's happening even more is people on social media who are getting a lot of validation and likes and all of that just on their physical appearance and how that affects their ego. I think that backfires because if you create an identity on social media, especially Instagram, where you're projecting yourself in a way with a lot of filters, where you're getting a lot of approval because people think you're beautiful, and then in real life you're not getting the same thing, that's very confusing to someone. Then you suddenly live in a way that's actually not honest. Like it's almost like what's happening is like there's a whole new dimension of life happening that is so-called social media.
Exactly. And if someone were in that situation where they're getting a lot of likes on social media, but it's not translating into their everyday life, and I'm looking at it from a coaching perspective, I'd be afraid that that client or that person is going to retreat from physical engagement, from outside human contact, and just go on to live in this virtual sphere where it's safe.
Yeah, you're basically creating your own prison.
Yes. So I had an experience that is the reason I brought up this topic, because I had somebody who I like and respect very much come back into my life after 20 years. And I have a really healthy self-confidence. I like myself. I have a great life. I have a great family. And I'm told a lot by a lot of people how great I am, especially intellectually. And this person very correctly and expertly called me out on some anti-feminist bullshit and called me out on some ways in which I was being a misandrist, where I was actually being prejudiced towards men. And it really shook me.
So let me ask you this, because you respect this person and this person said this to you. What was your first reaction? Was it defense?
I got angry.
Yeah, of course.
I got angry, and then I got pissed, and then I got defensive, and then I sat with it, and I was like, the reason that I feel uncomfortable right now is because very few people challenge me in life. And I'm so used to having people tell me how great I am versus challenge me. And so like I need to do some inner work here so that I can take this feedback not as a punch, but as feedback, and actually change so that I can be better in relationship with people who are actually in my life.
So that's the important piece. So I think, of course, the defense or the anger, all that is just being human. And most people from there make a left and they punch back, or they, try to say something that's going to, hurt the other person. But you sitting with it, I think that's where you start to dissolve your ego. That's where you check your ego. That's where I think you could turn your ego healthy, is when you actually sit with it, look inward, and then really don't become a student, right? Don't think that you know everything.
I processed it with a good friend because I realized I wasn't capable of seeing it through my own lens.
Oh, wow. That's taking the next level. I mean, that's really taking some ownership there.
It was straight ownership. And I had to, because it was such an unsettling experience for me that I needed to examine the way ego was really overtaking my life. And I was fucking cocky. And I was like, oh, like this person is really trying to actually have a relationship with me. And I'm used to surface relationships where people tell me I'm great. And that's not what's happening here.
Wow. And you know what's interesting is when you're a life coach, this is actually a real thing, where if you're life coaching and you're getting a lot of positive regard, a lot of accolades, and, you're helping me so much with my life and relationship, if that's all you're getting, it's very easy for your ego to get inflated, because you're not having your clients tell you like, hey, you know what, this was okay, but you really didn't help me that much.
Yeah, well, I've had that actually happen in session with clients too, which is one of the reasons I thought it was so important to talk about, because it's like, how do you get in front of it and how do you deal with it? And knowing that we all have automatic negative responses. Like my first response is anger. And I did not like that about myself at all. I was like, whoa, nobody needs me angry and popping off right now. And I had once a client, which she was really right. She was talking about her own eating disordered past. I have my own eating disordered past. She was talking about her daughter. I was thinking about my mother. And she said, "Are you judging me right now as a mom?" And I was like, "Oh, yes,
And so was there part of you that felt like you were, and then there's a part of you that was like, you know what, I'm not, like,
I
what?
was. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
judging her as a mom. I was projecting my own experience, which is something that you do naturally as a coach and something that you have to do a lot of inner work to kind of check yourself on. And so I was directly called out by a client, and I had to be honest with her, and I said, "You know what? I might have been. Let's start again. Tell me from your perspective. Let's have a go." And that's fucking hard to eat humble pie in that way.
Also, it hurts more if what they're calling out is something that you are known to be good at. So, so if you're a model and someone's like, I don't think you're attractive, that hurts. If you're someone that is, known to be super smart or intellectual or whatever, and then they call you out on that, that hurts. So it hurts more if someone is questioning what you believe are your gifts.
Yes, and it also depends on the relationship dynamic too. This is a person who I wanted to continue to give me money, right? So when I said that ego is transactional. I needed to both protect my ego and deflect in the situation to set myself up in a way that I could continue to have this client.
Yeah. And I think with life coaching, we actually have a responsibility as life coaches to check our ego.
Yeah.
Especially these days when life coaching isn't just about one-on-one sessions, but with social media. And if you're, speaking or writing books and you're getting kind of in front of audiences, there's more of a chance that your ego is going to be amplified than if you're just, doing one-on-one sessions, right?
And more of a chance that you're going to get feedback from people that is unpleasant.
Yes, I always believe that if everyone likes you, no one likes you. And so
Yeah.
you are going to get people that don't like you, that disagree with you. So this actually just happened to me. So I was recently on Dax Shepard's podcast, and he said, "Hey, listen, I saw a video you made about going through breakups," and he's like, "There's some of it that I liked, like how you define, breakups with this term of expired relationship, because it kind of allows you to let go and all that. But there's some stuff that I didn't like." And when he said that, I shrank. And I was like, oh shit, now he's calling me out, and he's having me on as an expert, but he's also deconstructing my expertness.
Right.
And I was terrified and I was defensive. And I mean, we actually ended up not talking about that because we start talking about other things like sex and stuff. But I remember in that moment that like it was like he just chopped my legs off.
Yes, exactly. And that's the exact point that I wanted to put the flashlight on with this, is because it's like, that's smart discourse, right? Like, I respect the hell out of that. Calling somebody in and saying, I actually took the time to look at your work. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't like. Let's have a critical conversation about it, right?
It takes courage it takes courage to have someone on a guest and actually say that to him, which I do applaud.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in coaching relationships, on the part of the client, we tell clients, if I ever do or say anything that makes you uncomfortable, please tell me. But the bravery it actually takes for the client to call the coach out on that or to say that is tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah. What a
Why
great
is like
reminder.
in relationships, like, have you ever had an experience where like you're pissed at your partner, but you're afraid to tell them?
Mm. Yeah, and vice versa, absolutely. And I've had partners who've been mad at me but are afraid to tell me. What do you think happens if you don't express that fear or have that conversation? What do you think happens to our ego?
If you, from which side? From the so like the experiential side of somebody just called you out?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think that you internalize your reaction, and that your reaction, I think so I'll give you a neurobiological breakdown, right? So, like, I responded to being called out for something that I actually believe is true with anger. So that anger for me, is a feeling, not a fact. It's not representative of the actual relationship. It's not representative of what actually happened, and it's not representative of like who I want to be, frankly. So if you don't sit with the discomfort and examine it and look for a way out and then take a minute to respond instead of react, you end up internalizing that response and maybe taking on or embodying all of the negative traits that you have.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I think it's important, not only for life coaches, but just everyone in general to question, to check, or as you say, put a flashlight on their ego. So then the question is, how do we do that? What are some steps we can do when we have that, whether it's anger or, sometimes ego is what ruins relationships. It's not just someone getting angry, but someone saying, I'm out, quitting because they've been checked. What are some steps that we can do to check our ego in a healthy way?
Yeah, I mean, I think feedback, is super important. Having somebody that you can talk to about this kind of thing. So, like, if you called me and you were like, Noelle, I was just on Dax Shepard, and he, had some criticisms about, my work, and I felt terrified, I would say, okay, let's get into it.
So vulnerability, actually being open, being vulnerable.
Actually being open. And I think the quality of the relationship is important. Like, I love you, and that I have your back and I have your best interests in heart. So, there's not a chance that I might have told you some things in the context of that, debriefing that might have ruffled your feathers a little bit, but ultimately, I love you. I did the same thing. I took this scenario to a friend who I trusted, who I know loves me, and was able to debrief it in a way that, like, yeah, my ego continued to take some hits and some bruises. I really kind of examined my own behavior, but I was like, wow, like, this was helpful.
Yeah. So it means that we're less defensive when we're having conversations with people that we actually trust and respect. I mean, so the person that you, had check your ego, because you respected and trusted him, after the emotion, you returned and you looked at it inward. I don't know if you actually returned the conversation with him, but that kind of hit for you, but it wasn't destructive.
It wasn't. Well, he actually asked me because I responded, and I was really honest, and I was like, I have some pushed fucking buttons right now. I need to take a step back.
Right.
And he said, are we still friends? And I was like, yeah, we are. And here's all the reasons that I was able to see your perspective.
I love that. Now let me ask you this. Did that conversation, like, now, do you actually feel closer to him because of it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, like, I think the value of these conversations, when we're checking ego and stuff, and especially if you allow that and lean into it, it actually produces glue, and that it actually brings people closer together because you just went through something. Yep. In a way, you just went through this little micro journey together, this roller coaster, this looking inward. Discovery, revelations, all of that. And so because of that, you now feel closer to the person. Also, there's courage behind someone checking you, like, in a nice, healthy way, in a kind way.
There is. And so, but that's intimacy, right? It's taking the mask off.
Yeah, yeah.
It's being willing on my end to take the mask off and be seen by another human as imperfect. And it's another human being willing to, like, put their own neck out there in a scenario that could have gone either way. There's a chance I could have said, you know what, I don't want to talk anymore. So that's what builds intimacy, I think, is the unmasking.
And I love that word, unmasking. And I think this is a great place to end it is, if you're a life coach or if you're one of our Catalyst life coaches, unmasking yourself, which takes courage, is a really powerful thing that's going to build trust with your clients.
Yes. Showing your own imperfections.
Yes.
Admitting weakness.
Yes. And unmasking doesn't mean to put your shit on your clients. Unmasking means just to humanize yourself and show yourself, and to, as we're talking about this episode, to check your ego. And
to process your shit. I mean,
yeah.
I have the luxury of processing through this podcast.
which I love. And I love that here's the thing, that takes this from a performance to actually us being ourselves and talking truth. And my favorite podcasts are the kind that are like this, where it's like you and I, we don't even rehearse. We just start talking and we're very honest. And we always I love our episodes because I love the conversation. Like there's no outline. There's no like, hey, we need to hit certain points. It's like, let's just turn the mic on and really kind of process. And that's what we're doing.
Exactly. And it's good to model the behavior, because it's the skills you can teach somebody from a bullet point checklist, but I feel like when you give the case study, when you give the experiential, when you turn that flashlight inward and you're like, all right, people, here's the guidebook for being a human 2018, it's valuable.
Well, Noelle, thank you for being my friend and for continuing to check me. And guys, if you're listening, what a great reminder. Trust the people who love you and don't be defensive, and allow them to check your ego. And also, you check the ego of the people that you could love and care about.
Absolutely.
All right, guys.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon, bud.
All right. Be well.